Now that we have the general idea of why and how we use constructors, I want to actually use them. Instead of having us repeat all of this code, I'm going to come up to File, press Save As, and change this to Animal Client Constructor. And then make sure I change the name here too. And then do the same thing for demo. File, Save As, Animal Demo Constructor. So this is just copy of my animal client and my animal demo, making sure you change the names and you do in fact save. And what we're going to do is we are going to clean up this code so we don't have to use the setters every time we want to create a new animal, making it a little redundant to use object-oriented programming. We are just going to define an animal by a constructor. So over in animal client, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a default constructor. So remember, the first rule of constructors is that we have to have the same name as the class itself. So animal client constructor, public animal client constructor, there it is. It doesn't have anything inside of the parentheses. That means it is a default constructor. So if the user tries to create a blank animal, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, if you create a blank animal, in fact, let's see what happens first, right? So I'm going to erase most of this stuff inside of here, and let's just see what happens. Let's make sure that we are creating the correct class. So this will be animal client constructor. Okay, that is good. And this is because we have that toString method, right? If we didn't have that toString method, then what would happen is we would get the reference. With the toString method, we get these null values. But what if we don't want the null values, we want our own defined null values? Well, inside of here, we could say if you build a blank animal, such as we did here, because there's nothing in the parentheses right here, then what we can say is that the species is equal to NA, not applicable. And we could say the name is equal to NA, the sound is equal to NA, we can give it an age of 0, and a weight of 0.0. So look at this output, and now see that I still have the same code, I haven't changed anything, apart from over here. The default constructor defines if a user creates a blank animal, no argument, they invoke this constructor, and the variables get these values. So watch these values change now. NA is an NA that makes a sound NA, is 0 years old, and weighs 0.0 pounds. So you can see the difference here is now instead of the default null values that Java gives us, we can provide it any values we want. So if I want to say, if you don't give me a species, I can say that your species is Harry Potter, then when I create this blank cat, it says NA is a Harry Potter, because that is my defined default value, which I'm going to change back to NA. So that is default constructors. Let's get into overloaded. So an overloaded constructor just means that the parameters aren't empty. We can have as many as we would like. For the purpose of this example, I'm just going to do a fully overloaded constructor, meaning I'm going to pass it all of the possible variables. So I'm going to say you have to give me a string for species, you have to give me a string for name, you have to give me a string for sound, you have to give me an integer for age, and you have to give me a double for weight. Okay, so if you invoke this constructor, you have to give me a species, a name, a sound, an int for age, and a double for weight. And if you do that, I can say my private species is equal to the public SP, that's what you passed me. My private name is equal to my public N, that's what you passed me. Sound is equal to what you passed me, age is equal to what you passed me, and weight is equal to what you passed me as well. So if you create an animal based on all of these values, if you give me all of these values, I'll assign my private to your public, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at this with the dog. So for this, I'm going to break this down here, and I'm going to say the dog, how does this go? We have species first, so it is a dog. We'll say the name is George. We'll say the sound is woof. we'll say the age is 4, and we'll say the weight is 11.5 pounds. So when I print this dog, let's just do a new line here, or let's make this a lot easier and just throw a new line at the end of any toString we get, so we don't have to keep doing that. So we get the separation. Here's our blank cat because it invoked the default constructor. Here is our overloaded dog because we passed it the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables that it requires, which is of course a string, 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 int, and double. All the variables you pass me get assigned to the privates, and we adjust them and print the toString as such. So when we do that, George is a dog that makes the sound woof. It's 4 years old and weighs 11.5 pounds. This is so much cleaner and easier than not using object-oriented programming, and so much cleaner and easier than what we saw in Animal Demo, where I had to set the value of every variable for my animal. We don't have to use the setters anymore because the constructor is doing all of that heavy lifting, that work for us. That is the power of a constructor. Now I told you you can have as many constructors as you would like. Before I get into that, let me show you what would happen if I removed like dog from here. The constructor freaks out and says, I don't have a constructor that deals with a string, string, int, and double. I only have a default, which takes nothing, or a string, 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 int, and double. So you have to be careful what you're passing it. There has to be a constructor to match that. So what if we said something along the lines of, I only know my animal's name. That's all I know about my animal. Well, I could create a new animal up here. Let's call it rabbit. Over here, we will make a new constructor that deals with that. Overloaded constructor that only deals with animal name. So I could say public animal client constructor takes a string of n, and I'll just copy and paste this stuff, assuming we don't know anything about our animal apart from the name. So here we can say name equals n. So if the user invokes this constructor, they give me the variable n. That means I don't know the species, it's NA. The name is set to what you told me, because that's what you do know. Sound, I don't know. Age, I don't know. Weight, I don't know. So if we create a rabbit, and we say Barry the rabbit, and we print our rabbit here, we get Barry is an NA that makes sound NA, 0 years old, and weighs 0 pounds. And that's because we invoked the constructor that deals with that. Remember, if I didn't create this constructor, then we cannot create a rabbit with just a string, because there's no constructor to handle that. So constructors define how an object can be built, and you define the variables as such in the process of doing that. So this was your introduction to constructors. We will be using them an awful lot. Hopefully it makes sense. We'll be using them in future examples, so watch out for those. And just try to grasp this because it is very important stuff.